Hey guys, and welcome back to Studio One with me, Gregor. Today I want to walk you through Sidechain Compression in Studio One. I'm going to show you what it is, how to set it up, going to give you a very prominent example of it, and I'm also going to reference a couple of other videos that I've already done on sidechaining if you're interested in other applications for it. Now, compression and sidechain compression are terms that you hear flying around all the time if you're into music production. And if you're not aware what compression even is to begin with, at a very basic level, compressors are meant to make the volume of a signal more even. So if my voice, for example, sounds very consistent, no matter if I'm closer to my mic or further away, or whether I'm whispering and talking really quiet or louder, that would not be possible for me to achieve without a compressor, because what the compressor does is it reacts to the peak volume of my voice and makes that quieter, and everything else gets louder. So basically what happens is that I get a more consistent volume, which is also important for podcasts because then people don't have to turn the volume up and down in their car as you're listening to it. And that's really achieved through a compressor. The way this works specifically is that you have a threshold that you set, a threshold level. And anytime the level goes beyond that, everything that goes beyond it gets attenuated by the ratio. So if you have a ratio of 2:1, then everything that goes past the threshold is only half as loud now. And then you just make up for the gain that was lost with the makeup gain afterwards. This is compression at a very basic level. But sidechain compression is very different in that you're not reacting, or the signal is not reacting to itself, but rather to a completely different signal. So the dynamics of the signal itself, how loud and quiet it is at various parts, has zero effect on the compression, and the only trigger is the external source, such as a kick drum, for example. And you can use that very creatively, but you can also use that almost like an invisible headroom gainer, depending on your settings. The more extreme the settings, the more audible. I'm going to show you just one example here, but feel free to alter this and take this in any direction you want. I'm also going to link a couple of my other videos featuring sidechain compression in the end card. So stay tuned. To kick things off, I just whipped up a quick acid techno style beat in a couple of minutes with drag and drop that literally took me like 2 minutes to do. And it sounds like this right now. Right. And you can really hear how the kick drum is kind of struggling because this synth stab sound with tons of sustain is just not making way for the kick drum at any point. And so you have two signals that are battling for the same headroom in the same frequency space, which is something you should typically avoid because just like in photography, you can't have everything in focus at the same time. Some things have to stand out a bit more at a certain moment. And that is what sidechain compression helps you to achieve. Now, depending on how we dial this in, we can either make it so that the kick drum just gets through the synth stab again without us really hearing any difference. But we can also make it so that sidechain compression is introducing some incredible pumping, which is very popular, particularly in EDM and big room. So let me show you how to set both up. First of all, we're going to go to the effects browser, and then we're going to go to the compressor right here. This is Studio One's stock compressor. It's going to work wonderfully for this. And we just drag and drop that directly onto our track that we want to duck down, either intensely or very subtly. Then we have to dial in the compressor, and we have to do that with sidechain enabled. If I don't enable sidechain here, then the threshold that I'm setting here is reacting to the level of the synth stab itself. And as you can see, there's not really any difference here in volume. It's just on off all the time. And so the compressor really wouldn't do much except just be a gain trim. This would be like having a mix tool with -4 decibels or something like that. You can see that thing is constantly working, and this is really not what compression is all about. Compression is all about dynamics, and if there's no dynamics whatsoever, then this is just a gain trim. So that's not what we want. Instead, we're going to use the sidechain to bring in a signal that does have dynamics, meaning a big difference between loud and quiet. In this case, that would be the kick drum. And we want to tick the send box here, not the output, because the output would actually route the entire signal to the compressor, muting the kick in the process. Can be nice for some ghost ducking effects, but in this case, not really useful. I want to have the send. Like the kick drum is sending to the main out, but at the same time, it's also sending to this compressor. What happens now is that the compressor is reacting every time the kick drum hits. If I mute the kick drum, nothing is happening. But as soon as the kick drum comes in, the reduction starts on the synth steps on track 1. As indicated by the gain reduction meter here on the compressor. Now, depending on how we dial this in, this can be either very obvious, like a creative intentional effect, like it is right now with very long attack and drastic threshold. Can make this as extreme as I want. Right, this will be like super obvious. But I can also dial it in that I make the attack very short, meaning as soon as the kick drum comes in, the compressor is reducing the synth step in volume, making way for the kick drum, giving the kick drum all the headroom it needs to punch through the mix. And then as soon as the kick drum stops, and I can dial that in specifically to the length of my kick drum, which is in this case around 200 or 300 milliseconds, I believe. As soon as the kick drum stops, the compressor also stops with the gain reduction. So it's almost like you can't even hear that this is happening, but somehow the kick drum is just getting through a lot more clearly than before. Have a listen. Right? Now you don't hear any obvious pumping, but compared to before, we just have a much more prominent kick drum. Okay, so that's like a basic example how to set up sidechain compression. I also want to note, if you set it up and you want to have that kind of pumping on all of your sounds in the song, then that's super easy to set up in Studio One. You just dial in your compression to your heart's content. And once you have something that you're happy with, you can just literally drag and drop that onto any other channel and it keeps the sidechain routing. So if I want this to pump to the kick drum as well, I just drag and drop this compressor over to this track. And now that's also sidechain. And then I can just mix the intensity of the pumping using the scent levels here. I can also adjust the scent level with a double click for even more precision. Right, so that's how you can use sidechain compression in Studio One. That's how easy it is. If you're interested in some more examples, for instance, you can duck your reverb if that's really massive, as long as the vocal is singing, to retain the clarity and definition of the vocal. But as soon as the vocal stops, the reverb brings in all the stereo richness. Then you can also do that with sidechain compression. I have a video tutorial showing you that right here. And if you're interested in doing more of this invisible headroom gaining stuff, then definitely check out my Pro EQ sidechain tutorial. This is an amazing thing that's now possible with Studio One 6 and completely revolutionized my mixing. Hopefully it's going to do the same for you. Thank you for watching.